Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And a new season is become, and we are very excited for it. And for as we're going to look over Porto versus Vitoria Guimares, very good fixture. We're going to look over Porto, Vitoria Guimares, the matchup, predicting the lineups, predicting the score, and who better off to start the season with me than Albert from the Long Ball Football Podcast? Welcome on.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's great to be back on the show.
Yeah, well, you're always welcome on here. So, as usual, let's start on the Porto side of things. There's been a lot of changes since the Club World Cup, although not too much changes, which I think is a good sign. So, first of all, changing manager. Francesco Farioli, formerly of Ajax, has joined. Definitely somebody, as I said before, that Andre Villas-Boas most likely sees himself in him, given in Farioli's age and how young Villas-Boas started when he was a manager. And I would expect at least Champions League from him, or at least much closer than what Porto finished last season. I'm excited about the signings, especially Victor Frohart, and I think they've got a very strong chance. I'm not sure who. Honestly, I'm not sure who will win in the league this season. But Porto could be one of them. And there's definitely a huge mood lift among the Porto fans going into this season. Last time you were on, we talked about the Porto derby. How do you reflect on Porto towards the end of the last season, in the summer, and how you feel about them going into this season? Oh, and also Farioli and the new signings.
Well, it's been a summer of great change, and it's very interesting how quickly the kind of feeling around the club has changed. I think it was at a real low point following the Club World Cup, which I thought was slightly unfortunate because it's a kind of, in some ways, a competition that never used to exist and normally wouldn't have been something that a manager or a group of players was judged on. But it came about, and it was a big opportunity to showcase the club on the world stage, and it was a particularly poor showing from Porto, and obviously it resulted in Anselmi leaving. And I think at that point in the summer, things were quite bleak off the back of quite a poor season in the league, and then very poor showing in the Club World Cup, and the ultimate kind of acceptance that this manager had failed, which I don't think anyone wants to ever admit. It's funny though, because I was kind of left asking the question: if the Club World Cup had never happened, would Martin Anselmi still have his job? The answer is possibly yes. And definitely at the end of the last season, I was one of the people saying I think you still have to give him this summer transfer window and a chance to start the season as manager, because he had very few chances to kind of at least bring some players in, or make the team his own. Although I'm not here to say that he was doing a great job. I think he would say himself that he wasn't doing amazingly well. I just would have said perhaps should have been allowed a little bit more time. But as it happens, I think it was the right decision, and perhaps it was somewhat opportunistic, perhaps, by AVB. I mean, another question: if Farioli had never been sacked by Ajax, or if he'd never left Ajax, excuse me, would Anselmi have been sacked? I think it was definitely a case of Anselmi became available, the leadership sounded out whether it would be a move he was interested in, and as soon as those things kind of lined up, I think they made the decision that he was going to be the new man. And again, it seems somewhat harsh on Anselmi, but it probably is a better choice for manager. I think he's a very exciting young coach. He's got a lot to prove. He's got a lot to learn as well. That's fair to say. I mean, anyone who saw how his Ajax team capitulated at the end of last season, I don't think that was particularly a good mark on his record. But still, he's got a lot going for him at a very young age. And like I said, ever since the Club World Cup ended and he was appointed, and some of the start signings have started coming in, the mood has really dramatically shifted. I think there was a number of very, very good signings. Um, you already mentioned Victor Froholt, who looks to be a great player at a very young age. Gabri Vega looks like a very exciting player. I think Alberto Costa is an upgrade at right back. Borja Sainz is a winger that the club needed. And so it's been a positive summer. And like you, I think it's very hard to pick who's going to win the league this season. You know, all the clubs have kind of changed a little bit. All of the big three clubs have their strengths and weaknesses. But Porto are definitely not out of that question. And I think at the end of the last season, that's not something we thought we would be saying.
Indeed. Myself and George Andrade, the English one, we of course discussed Anselmi in depth and the transition, but certainly when it came to Anselmi, could he keep his job? One of the big questions you've got to ask is he improving this team? And to be honest, I think the only three players that he improved in terms of individuals were João Mario, Francisco Moura, and Rodri Moura. So that was a stain against him. And then, of course, the Club World Cup as well, being not in a difficult group at all. I think the standard would have been second place, round of 16, but Porto could have potentially got to that quarterfinals had they been at their best, and that was a stain on another bad reflection on Anselmi. But certainly, I'm very excited as to what Farioli is going to bring, and to transition into the business side. Alberto Costa for João Mario for that swap deal, fantastic business, because Juventus fans were getting excited about how Costa would do next season. Porto only had a 3 million loss on him, 50 million euro signing, 12 million for João Mario going to Juventus. Excellent business, and of course the fans on Porto side, very maybe even and laughing to say that we managed to sell João Mario in that manner, and I've seen some unhappy Juve fans on that matter. I know, to think Gonzalo Borges would go for 9 million to fine odds, excellent business. When Ivan Marcano left, I was worried about about the leadership position, because within the players that was a problem last season, and having Marcano out wouldn't have helped, especially, and I think a full rebuild would have made that problem worse. But thankfully, Diogo Costa is staying, and perhaps not the best leader, but still a figure. And hopefully some leadership within the rest of the squad develops come this season. Early thoughts. Where do you think Porto will finish within this season?
I think it would be quite a competitive top three this year. Like I said, I think all the big three clubs are in a place where there's not a particular standout. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. If you'd asked me even sort of 3 or 4 weeks ago, I probably would have had Porto definitely in third. I think that whilst there are a lot of good signs and it is looking a lot better, I think there is one issue still which remains, which is that I think they don't quite have the depth in the squad that the other clubs do. I mean, I think Porto are in a great position to put out a very strong starting 11. But I think after that, with some of the players that they're going to need to rely on to come in and fill the gaps, maybe with injuries and stuff, I think perhaps that's where they might be weaker than Sporting or Benfica. So I think I probably still would say third. I don't think I would be surprised if it was second. And I definitely think if they were to finish third, it wouldn't be that far behind the even first place. I do see this season being a bit closer than it was. Well, the top three being closer together than they were last year.
Um, sure. When it comes to the title race, for the first time, not even for the first time today. I'm split on who wins. As Sam Fonseca has said, Benfica have the best squad of the three, but the off the field problems are potentially going to hinder them, and also Bruno Lage, as you have discussed on the podcast, a great manager for saving a club in a bad situation. Good at getting them into the right direction. But when it comes to the most important games, I'm not going to count Porto because of how much of a messy situation they were in. But Sporting CP for the title games, he was lacking, and he's, for good and bad aspects, he's the Portuguese Gareth Southgate, and I don't know whether I say I love Gareth Southgate, but I at least highly respect what he's done for job. I probably wouldn't have considered Porto until Sam Fonseca predicted them to win, and Sporting CP seems like a middle ground option, but still a maybe. But hopefully, Porto turn out to be an excellent wild card come this season. And then also, what was that? I did see something else, and that's any words on George Costa, who passed away this week?
Yeah, such a tragic loss, and such a shock at such a young age for a man who was still so important, such an important figure in Portuguese football. Obviously everybody knows what a legend he was from his playing days and what he achieved in his career. He was very closely linked to Mourinho, obviously, because of their relationship and what they achieved together. And he will of course go down as a legend at the club for Porto, but more than that, I think he's shown that he's one of the most important figures in Portuguese football in recent years. And he was a manager at various clubs since he retired as a player, and now the role that he took up at Porto alongside AVB, it made a lot of sense. And I think you just saw that this was a man who not only still lived and breathed the game, but was still incredibly influential within it and was still incredibly respected at Porto. And I think it's just such a tragedy on a human level to lose somebody that young, and who was still right at the top of their game in what they were doing. So yeah, it's a real tragedy.
Absolutely, and on the side, you see and feel his presence on the new signing videos that Porto put out. He was at the facilities when he had the cardiac arrest, which was also devastatingly unfortunate. And I I'm not sure where Porto go from here in terms of replacing England, but Villas-Boas has been great off the pitch side of things. And welcome to Tennis. Thanks for joining. Good to have you here. So let's get into the Vitoria Guimares side of things. The opposition. I see you wearing your shirt, despite for the record, he's a fan of the league rather than a fan of the teams. Um, but Vitoria Guimares, when I hear some people say that the the Liga Portugal is weak, and outside of the big three, as well as Braga, I feel like Vitoria Guimares is an exception to that rule, and maybe for Medicao as well. I think Vitoria Guimares could be a team that could compete in at least most of the other leagues in Europe. Um, they're competitive against the big three, and Braga as well. I know they got at least one win in the last two seasons against Benfica. They've got results against Sporting CP, and to transition nicely, they in the last two away games to Porto, they won away in Sergio Conceição's last season, and they managed to get a draw at the Dragão. I believe Anselmi was managing at that point. What I like about this fixture is that whilst not the toughest of the season, it will be a test for Farioli, as Vitoria Guimares, usually the modern day fifth best team in the league, and also it's a side that Porto have not beaten at home in the league at least for two seasons. And we've not really talked much about Vitoria Guimares on the stream. I think the only really all it really was I started the channel mid-season, so I did a shorts review on the 1-1 draw. I may have briefly mentioned them in like related conversations. So thoughts on Vitoria Guimares last season, how they could do this season, and anything else you might want to share in regards to the club.
Yeah, well, it's obviously a big club in Portugal in terms of, well, mainly in terms of the fan base, really. It's got a very, very active and passionate fan base, and a fan base of quite a considerable size, which is fairly uncommon in Portugal outside of the big three. So it's a club where you definitely feel that there's great potential for it. But I think the reality is, in definitely in recent years, it's not been particularly spectacular for Victoria. Last year they were off to a great start. You know, they'd finished in Europa Conference League qualifying places the season before. They started their season early in the Europa Conference League, and they had, of course, the man who's now the sporting manager, Rui Borges, in charge, and he did a great job navigating them through the Conference League qualifiers earlier in the season. They had maybe a slightly sticky start to the league season, but that was probably to be expected, seeing as they were juggling so many games and they didn't have the biggest squad in the world. But things looked to be fairly positive. And then, of course, it was derailed somewhat. Sporting sack their manager and needed replacement, and they decided that Rui Borges is the man to be the new sporting manager. He then leaves, of course, and Vitória went through two different managers. They employed Daniel Souza for a very brief period of time, and then they took on the former Rio Ave manager, Luis Ferreira. And I think it's fair to say that, again, it wasn't a particularly spectacular, although not disastrous, season. You point out that they've had some good results against the big clubs, and they definitely are capable of their moments, and they've had good moments in recent seasons. But I don't think any Vitoria fan would be saying at this point that they're particularly delighted with how things are. That said, I think the kind of opinion is a little bit split on where Vitoria are at this season. I'm quietly optimistic. I think they've done some good stuff over the summer. Most importantly, they've got a new manager. I mean, Luis Ferreira did pretty well, but I don't think he did quite as well as we hoped he would do, and he did leave at the end of the season. And so they brought in Luis Pinto, 36-year-old manager who was the man who got Tondela promoted from the Segunda Liga last season. So I like the fact that they've gone for a promising young manager, promising young Portuguese manager over the summer. I think that bodes well. Some fresh energy and a manager on the up. I think that's important. They've done some decent business over the summer. They've signed a winger called Fabio Blanco from Maritimo. So they're signing good talent from the second division, which I think is something they should do. They picked up some experience in the likes of Rodrigo Abascal from Bavista. They brought in a left back called Lebedenko, Ukrainian left back, who people might remember from playing for Vizela, and Miguel Nobrega from Rio Ave. So there's some Primera Liga experience there, although perhaps not star players. They signed a striker who scored 23 goals in the Latvian league last season. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can transfer that goal scoring form from the Latvian first division to the Portuguese first division. But I think they do a decent job of signing good quality Premier League players. They've now got a good young manager. Although to play devil's advocate, I discussed this on the Long Ball Football podcast with my colleagues this week, and there was some differing opinion. I know some people don't see the squad as particularly strong. Perhaps they don't have those star players that they used to have in the likes of Jota Silva, Jairo Mangas, players like that. So I think, like I said, the opinion is perhaps split. I would like to see them have a consistent season. There's no European distractions this year. And I'd like to see them build a little bit, and I think they can definitely aim for fifth place. And like I said, right at the very top, they've got stuff going for them which other clubs can only dream of. Mainly a very large, very passionate fan base who can support them, and if they can get them on side, I think they could be a real uh, they could be a real interesting team this season. But it remains to be seen. I think it is. I do have to caveat that with the fact that the squad probably isn't the strongest it's ever been.
Um, Thanks for sharing. Got a few comments to catch up on. Interested to see Gabri Vega's debut. A lot of hype around him, surely. Well, he did have his debut at the Club World Cup, and he was very disappointing. But under new management, hopefully Farioli's the man to make him excellent. But looking forward to see what he does in the league. Saw all the in the UEFA coefficient, Porto are above AC Milan. Interesting. That season was one to forget. But besides the up competitions, and then there's a question here. Which avenue would be easy for Porto to get at Champions League football? The League or the Europa League? I would probably lean more towards the league because the Europa League will occur on Thursday into the games. So, and I'm also not sure quite how Porto stack up against the opposition that will come in soon. So, still a bit of a mystery. And whilst getting second will only take them to the qualifiers, there's still not many games to win to get to that stage. But though I can see a possibility that the Europa League might be an easier avenue. What do you think, Albert?
Oh, I would 100% say the league is the easiest way to get into the Champions League. I think to win the Europa League would be uh, incredible achievement for Porto, and it would be very very difficult if you imagine all the different knockout games they'd have to play against quality opposition. Whereas in the league, to finish second, really all they have to do is be better than one other team in the big three over 2 games. And then the rest will probably take care of itself if all goes well. So 100%, I would say the league would be the easiest avenue to the Champions League.
Yeah, great points made there. Had something on Vitoria Guimares which did slip my mind, but in the meantime, I will ask, where do you anticipate them to finish this season?
I think they'll definitely aim for fifth, but we see more and more teams being competitive around that area of the table. The likes of Santa Clara, Estrela Praia, even Famalicão, if they can get their act together, will be up there. So I would say top seven. Whether that's fifth, sixth, or seventh, I'm not entirely sure. It remains to be seen. I would like to say fifth, but realistically, I think it'll be more like sixth or seventh.
I have a feeling they'll finish above Santa Clara. I don't, as far as I'm aware, they don't have the depth to compete in both the Conference League and the league. And last season was arguably a honeymoon season for them, even though they've got the potential to do well again. But it's just about whether Famalicão take it to the next level. But I think the Vitoria Guimares certainly do have a good chance at fifth place. Do you have anything else to say before we get into the match preview?
No, I'm ready. Let's get into it.
So going into this, as I mentioned, Porto have not won. Was did they even win in the 2022-23? Yeah, they did, because I believe Vitoria Guimares was the last game of the season and Porto got a convincing win. So no win in at home since the 2022-23 season in the league against Vitoria Guimares. How do you anticipate this game going down?
Well, I would be confident from a Porto perspective of winning this game. I know what you're saying about the past results, but I'm not a particularly superstitious person. I think you can always look at a game with fresh eyes, and it's always a different set of players, and now we've got a different manager and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think going into this game fresh, I think Porto will be feeling positive. I think they'll have a lot of players excited to make their debuts, a lot of players excited to perform in front of a big crowd on the first game of the season. And I think they'll have a manager who wants to get the season off to a positive start. I think they'll be highly motivated. I think they'll be well organized. And I think the quality that they've got will definitely be enough to see through a victory in this game. Um, in terms of the actual score, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it will be a comfortable win. Whether that turns into a kind of win by multiple goals remains to be seen. But I expect, a fairly positive, confident performance from Porto. And Vitoria, I think, are just going to be a little bit kind of. They're not going to have quite enough to deal with Porto in this occasion. And I know they would love to, with it being not too far away between Guimarães and Porto, they'd love to kind of be the noisy neighbours to upset the first game and what have you. But yeah, I don't think the quality's quite there in this Vitoria side to make too much of trouble for Porto.
Well, I will get into specifics of what I think the result will turn out, but I'm thinking that Porto will probably win. what I was thinking is that Vitoria Guimares can be competitive. Um, so if they are to win, what do you think they've got to do to give themselves the best chance of doing so?
Well, it's going to be. I think Porto will be quite good defensively. I know the defense was something that we maybe criticised last season. They couldn't find a centre back pairing, and maybe it wasn't the strongest area of the pitch. But I think now with the new right back and players like Bednarek and that bit of experience, and of course Diogo Costa in goal, I do see Porto being quite solid. So I would say, from Vitoria's perspective, if they're gonna get a goal, or if they're gonna make an impact on the game, they're not going to be able to create too many chances. I don't think. I don't think they'll have a lot of the ball, so they'll have to rely on maybe a counter attack, or they'll have to rely on a set piece or something along those lines. They'll have to seize their opportunities whenever they get them, because I definitely think Porto will probably control the majority of the game and also be quite solid defensively. So yeah, Victoria might have to be a little bit patient. They might have to wait for a counter attack opportunity. They might have to be ready to pounce on a mistake should there be one, or try and get something from some kind of set piece when the opportunity arises.
Indeed, I would expect probably 65% to 35% in Porto's favour in terms of ball possession. And going back to the defence, one of the signings that did concern me was Jan Bednarek, having had two relegations with Southampton. So that's a bit worrying. And has he been a difference maker at Poland for the national team? I'm not sure. What do you think of that signing?
I think it was a surprise, wasn't it? It was. I didn't really see it coming, and it also didn't really feel like a very Porto signing. But I think, from Porto's perspective, I think what they would have looked at with that signing is the opportunity to get a player of, well, on paper, Premier League quality and with Premier League experience for quite a limited fee, because I know the fee was quite low. And they needed experience at the back with Marcano going. So in some
Yep.
ways, I think it does make sense. I do think it is a bit of a random transfer, perhaps, to sign a Polish centre back from Southampton, when there's maybe different centre back options out there. But like I said, I think they would have looked at it in terms of kind of value for money when it comes to experience and ability. And I know Bednarek and Southampton probably didn't um, do their reputations many favors last season with how that season went, and what have you. But maybe, you could argue, on the other hand, maybe Porto have done a shrewd bit of business by signing a player whose reputation is low, but perhaps there's some untapped quality there. Still, maybe Bednarek's a player that could play at Premier League level, and they've been able to get him for a reduced fee. I think that's how they'll see it, and I hope they're correct. But yeah, I agree. It was kind of a strange signing when it happened.
Indeed, and hopefully, in terms of the positive factors you mentioned, Porto earlier in the summer were heavily linked to Taylor Harwood Bellis, also from Southampton.
Yeah.
That didn't materialise, and for all the potential faults that Bednarek has, I still expect him to be a big upgrade on Jose Pedro. It'll be interesting to see who are the two starting centre backs, because there are definitely three that have a shout. We'll get into the specifics shortly. Um, so, in fact, if there isn't anything else on your end, we could even go into the lineups. Anything else for you to add in terms of the game?
No, just that I'm looking forward to it very much. And Monday night's always a good night to watch football, in my opinion, especially if it's on the TV.
Okay. We do have another comment. I believe this is referring to Jan Bednarek. Will be an important for him here. Personally, since it will be a World Cup year. Yeah, providing that Poland can qualify, so he'll certainly be doing his cause justice by potentially doing well here, and Poland probably will probably have to qualify through the playoffs if they are to get there. But certainly an interesting point there. So let's go on to the lineups, and this is one I think we can certainly do together. Can anticipate a sneeze coming, so I'll. But but given that Diogo Costa is staying and will no doubt be the captain, he'll start. I'll check the injuries and suspension source I tend to use. But Alberto Costa, I think, will be at right back. And then the centre back pairing, this will be an interesting one. I think it's between Perez, Bednarek, and the new Croatian player Perpic. If all are fit, and I'm just about to check on that, and I'm just checking on that now. Who do you expect will start of the three?
I think he'll play Bednarek definitely. And I think if he then has to choose between Perpic and Perez, of course there's Pedro as well, but I don't think
Oh yes,
Pedro will be used in this game. I think he would probably start Nehuen Perez because I don't think it's smart necessarily to start on the first game of a new season with a brand new centre back pairing. Obviously, Perez and Bednarek is a new pairing, but Perez has played in the league before, has played in
point.
for this club, so I think he will probably go for Perez and Bednarek.
And Perez was one of the better centre backs as well. It looks like the only one that's not going to be available is Marco Grujic, although he did play against Atletico Madrid in the friendly. But another thing that I was wondering about was that the left back option. It seemed clear to me that it would be Francisco O'Mora, but going off that Atletico Madrid friendly, and haven't managed to see the 11s in the other two friendlies because I was on holiday at that point. Do you expect Mora to keep his place, or does he go for Martin Fernandez, who was playing there against Atletico Madrid? I don't think Zaidu Sanusi will start. He may come on off the bench, but if I was to guess one, I'd probably still say Francisco Mora. But what do you think?
Yeah, this is one where the Porto fans might know more than me. I haven't followed the preseason super closely, but Rodrigo Mora for me was one of the best players in the team last season. Was definitely one of the
Francisco
brightest.
Mora.
Francisco Mora. Oh, well, Rodrigo Mora was as well. But in terms of the left back,
Yeah.
Francisco Mora was one of the best players in the team. One of the biggest positives of the
Agreed.
whole season, really,
100%.
his signing. So, I can't see from my perspective how he wouldn't be given the opportunity to at least start the season and retain his place.
Yeah. Who knows? It could have been a tactical reason why he didn't play at Atletico Madrid, but still, I would expect Mora to start. Now, where it gets very interesting is the midfield. I think Varela will start. Looks like that Farioli will be using a 4-3-3. whilst I still get et up the squad and really look deeply in the options, which I do know, but what are you thinking for this midfield? Because there's options there. Gabri Vega. Um, yeah, what do you think? And I'll give my suggestions afterwards.
Well, I think the biggest story, even I've picked up over pre-season, was the fact that he's been experimenting with a lineup which doesn't include Rodrigo Mora, and maybe that's a shape thing. So I would be inclined to suggest that the midfield that we saw against Atletico Madrid is probably his preferred midfield at this point. Maybe that's purely for tactical reasons in terms of the shape he wants to play, with Varela in the middle and then Froholt and Gabri Vega alongside. And I think we did see obviously the benefits of that with Froholt, who was fantastic. And I think Gabri Vega will be a very good player as well. And Varela will be much improved under Farioli, I'm sure. So, it feels strange to talk about a Porto side where Rodrigo Moura doesn't start. But I think based on what we've seen in pre-season, possibly that's what Farioli will do.
Yeah, there's a potential in that. I mean, if you go for a double pivot, then it will probably be Varela and Estaku, but I'm expecting a 4-3-3. So, and how can we how can we forget Victor Frahart? He's got to start. He's been very impressive from what I've seen in the friendlies so far, and even though I think Gabri Vega is quite attack minded, I think he'll start there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I would 100%.
The front three, this will get very interesting. Um, I would imagine Luke De Jong won't start this game. I'm thinking. I'm actually not sure for right wing. Normally, I would go from right to left, but for the sake of getting the names sooner, I think Rodrigo Mora will start, go on the left. But then there is still the argument that maybe he does get benched and maybe he does have to earn his spot back in the team. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he starts. And then I'll say Samu is the number 9. And I'd probably say Boy Sainz goes on the right, although I would have expected him to be more playing on the left. You've also got some options like William Gomez. He can pay out wide. Or actually, now that I've seen Brazilian Pepe, I think I'll say it'll be Pepe on the right, Samu a striker, and Mora on the left. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. I think Pepe will start. I think Samu will start. I think it might possibly be Borja Signs on the left though, and with Rodrigo Mora on the bench. That's the only possible difference I could see. But yeah, I think like you, maybe it's a bit too soon for Luke De Jong to start. I think you'll probably want him to come off the bench. And yeah, Pepe, I think again, similarly with the experience that he has, I think it would be a smart move to start him on the first game of the season.
And some of the other attackers we didn't mention, Danny Namaso Loda will probably be on the bench. Dennis Gould probably won't be in the squad because he's closer to a profile of Samu and Luke De Jong than Danny is. And as I also mentioned, William Gomez. But yeah, it looks like we're and of course Gruitch in the midfield doesn't look to be fit. So Albert, how do you think Vitoria Guimares will line up on Monday?
Well, I have to say, Matt, unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure because they have got a lot of new players. and I haven't seen any of their pre-season action. I think the best I can do is probably point out some of the kind of new faces we might see. They're going to have a new goalkeeper in Castillo, the Colombian, who, yeah, who's been brought in this season. I think he will start. I think we'll see Fabio Blanco start. I think we'll see Tamar Arcanjo start because he was a very good player last season on the wings. But honestly, after that, unfortunately, it's going to be a bit of a mystery. And I think even Vitoria fans would probably say they're not entirely sure how they're going to start because, like I said, it's a lot of new faces. And I think in preseason they've been experimenting a lot. It's been a bit all over the place. So yeah, I guess we'll find out.
Who are the players you expect to retain their spot from last season going into this game?
Yeah, good point. I think we'll definitely see people like Miguel Maga at right back, Thomas Handel, the defensive midfielder, who I think was very impressive. Um, Also um, worth remembering that they have Thiago Silva, very good creative midfielder. Um, It'll be interesting to see whether he starts with Nelson Oliveira up front or the new striker Aliou Ndoye, much younger, but Nelson Oliveira obviously has the experience. They have the winger Gustavo Silva, who I like a lot, who I think did quite well, and Arcanjo, like I said, very good player. Players like Samu ex Vizela, who's like an attacking midfielder, who I think was very solid last year. So they do have, like I said, quite a few options, for quite a few experienced options. I think centre back is a little bit out in the open. Not sure, not sure what lineup they'll go with what pairing they'll go with for that. Left back as well, they've got a couple of good options. The former Porto player, Joao Mendes, and of course now
Yeah.
Lepedenko from Vizela. So they got a couple of options there. But yeah, I think we'll see some familiar faces in the likes of Miguel Maga, Thomas Handel, Thiago Silva, Arcanjo, Gustavo Silva as well. So yeah, there'll be some familiar faces.
What formation are you thinking?
I think probably either a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, I was wondering about the same,
Mm.
but sounds like we've also pretty much agreed on the Porto lineup as well. So anyone watching on the replay, feel free to leave your lineups and then leave your predictions as well, and any other thoughts. Because predictions, that's where we're going to go to next. I before all the stream, I was thinking a 2-1 win, but going off this stream so far, I'm not so settled on that. So Albert, what do you think? What's your score prediction for this
Well,
game?
I'll go for a 2-0 win for Porto. And if you want me to be even more specific, I'll say I think there'll be a fairly early goal in the first
Okay.
15 minutes, settle the nerves, get the fans kind of a bit more relaxed. I think the game might be a tiny bit kind of a little bit slow, maybe a little bit cagey. Both teams, obviously, first game of the season, and then a second goal later in the game towards the end to kind of seal the deal. I think we'll see a Porto control the game for the majority.
Okay, then we've got our Man United fan in the chat, T10S, saying 3-1 to Porto.
Hmm.
I I'm wondering about 3-1 as well. The only thing I'm questioning is, do Vitoria Guimares have enough to get one past Porto's defence? Um, hmm. I think I'll agree with you on 2-0. Initially, my initially in this last 10 minutes, was thinking that 3-1 would probably be a good scoreline. But then considering that Porto are more well set up here, it might be difficult for Porto for Vitoria Guimares to find a way against Porto, and I don't think Porto will batter Vitoria Guimares. So I'll say 2-0 as well. So oh yeah. Any other final thoughts from you, Albert?
No, but only that I'm very much looking forward to the season starting and to see how Porto do. Like I said, it's been a very interesting summer, and I'm very happy that Porto are in a more positive place than when they left, when they finished last season. So I think that's really good for not just for Porto fans, but also for the league to make it more competitive. So yeah, here's to a good season.
Absolutely, and thanks a lot, TTS. On another note, do you know why Benfica are not playing this weekend?
Yeah, they've been given a break to prepare for their Champions League game, which takes
Oh,
place
okay,
on Wednesday, I believe, their Champions League qualifier. Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Of course, we've got another Lisbon derby with Casapia versus Sporting CP tonight.
Mhm.
So we're both looking forward to the game and the season coming up. So yeah, where can the viewers, as both watching now and on the replay, find you? Because I've had a subscriber growth since you were last on.
Yeah, cheers. So it's the Long Ball Football Podcast, and that's football spelt the Portuguese way, FUTBOL. And it's a weekly podcast. We do it every week, and we do a review show of all the weekend's action. It was started by myself and my brother Barney, and this season we've brought on board two brand new contributors in Kevin Fernandes and Andrew Batista. So a lot of great expertise in the podcast, and we talk about all the teams in the league and all the games, not just the big three, as much as we can. And we're on Twitter and YouTube and anywhere that you get your podcasts. We should be there. So yeah, check us out.
Yep, the Spotify is in the description below. However, the names are the same on Twitter, on YouTube, the other forms that they've got about. You've got about going off your link tree or whatever your equivalent is. You've got four or links to listen to the podcast on, including YouTube and Spotify.
Mhm.
But always great to have you on and to give a little bit um, of a context or some of the content for the rest of this month. I'll likely do a video stream, which will probably be 5 to 10 minutes for the Gil Vicente Porto game. I'll also, and then a short review on that, plus a shorts review on this first game coming this weekend. And then I'll probably do the same the week after. And then we have a special guest on for the preview of the Sporting CP versus Porto stream, as Sam Fonseca will be on to preview with me. And I'll certainly aim to do at least one other video in regards to the transfer review. But once again, great to have you on. Great to have viewers here, and thanks T10S for your contributions as well. We're looking forward to the game tonight. And until next time, Forza Porto.